as the UK prepares to host a major summit of world leaders on AI, I'm going to be asking the Science and Technology Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, whether we should all be fearful of its development. With Labour tearing itself apart over how to react to the war in the Middle East, I'll be joined by Khalid Mahmood. He's the Labour MP who is calling for a ceasefire and who helped to set up a meeting between Keir Starmer and Muslim Labour MPs earlier this week. And as Israel finally looks to be launching its ground offensive in Gaza, we'll get some expert analysis on what's next. I'll be asking the MOD's former Middle East advisor, Sir Simon Mail, how the conflict is likely to play out. And international lawyer Natasha Hausdorff will be joining us to discuss whether the invasion is legal. I'm also going to be joined in the studio by Jeremy Corbyn's former comms chief, James Schneider, and the news editor, in fact, of the Jewish News, Justin Cohen, who'll debate whether the government should be calling for a ceasefire in the first place. And John Howard, Australia's second longest-serving Prime Minister, is also going to be joining me. We're going to be discussing everything from Israel to how he thinks the Tories are doing here in the UK. So, to not put it mildly, it's a jam-packed show. Don't go anywhere. Get yourself a cup of tea, bed in, and do not miss the next 90 minutes. And to get us all kicked off, joining me now is my GB News colleague and associate editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce. Piercey, as I like to call him.
Morning to you.
Morning. Lovely to see you.
My first time on this programme. I can't think why it's taken so long.
This is synergy. I love to see it happening. We're both associate editors, admittedly of rival newspapers, but there is quite a lot going on in the press this morning.
There is.
Obviously, we've got Israel and Gaza dominating, but this is a great story by your sister paper, The Mail on Sunday. London Jihad demo leader is NHS DOCTOR. This is a guy who was a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir. It's not prescribed here, but it is banned in some countries.
12.
And lo and behold, The Mail on Sunday discovers that he's also a GP, but he operates under a different name, funnily enough, Andrew.
Yeah, he does. And so by day, he does his job, and we're very grateful he does his job, and we're sure he does it very well as a GP in Harrow in North London. But he's also the leader of the British group of this organisation that's been prescribed in 12 organisations, including Bangladesh. China, for God's sake, has banned this group. Russia, Turkey, and it shamelessly on its own website in the last 2 weeks, Camilla, talked about the great joy that the Gaza invasion of Israel had caused Muslims worldwide. Joy, it was an act of overt terrorism, and there we've got a GP whose job is to bring people's health back to normal, to care for people.
Yeah. To treat everyone equally.
To treat everyone equally. And this organisation also, they say they're not a terrorist organisation. Fine. They want one worldwide leader for the whole Muslim faith. But at demonstrations in the last 2 or 3 weeks, when he's been speaking, this GP, his supporters have been chanting for holy war, holy war. It's really disturbing.
I think it's disturbing also for Jewish doctors operating in the UK. We've done a story, I did a story myself, about a Harley Street doctor who'd kind of put this post on Instagram with a swastika alongside an Israel flag. It was absolutely disgusting. It's being investigated by the GMC. There's a story in the Telegraph today saying 3 different medical professionals are being investigated, not just by the GMC, but also the CST and the police. I mean, these people are on one hand working for the NHS and on the other on the streets of London, you know, sharing a platform at times with people who are, I don't know why we're making any bones about it, spewing out Jew hate. That's what it is.
Yeah, Jew hate. And let's not call it anti-Semitism. Let's call it Jew hate, because if you talk to some young people, Camilla, they don't know what anti-Semitism means. They don't know the expression. It is overt Jew-hating. A GP also, by the way, in law, has a duty to report any patient he suspects, or she suspects, is sidling into extremist behaviour.
Yeah.
Do we really think this guy, who is the leader of an organisation that's been banned in at least 12 worldwide organisations for peddling anti-Jew hate, is ever going to do that? I'm sorry,
Why don't
I
we
don't
ban
think
this
so.
organisation?
I don't know. Michael Gove, I've talked to Michael Gove about this many times. He's now, what is he, Levelling Up Secretary. He's been very vocal on this, saying it should be banned. Others say if you do that, it just causes more tension within the Muslim community. But I think we have to look very carefully at it, especially at the moment.
There's also been a lot of anti-Semitism found on university campuses, which is something I'm going to ask Michelle Donnellan, because she was briefly Education Secretary.
For about 24 hours.
About 24 hours. But prior to that, she was Universities Minister, so she can hopefully comment on that. You mentioned Michael Gove there. There's a really interesting story on the front of the Sunday Telegraph. It's headline, Ministers plan extremism crackdown as fears grow over UK permitting anti-Jewish hate. Just what we were saying. So what are they planning? I think this is a link-up between Michael Gove and Suella Braverman.
Yeah. So that's the Home Secretary who's never knowingly modest and pulling her punches. They're very concerned that the legislation we've got at the moment, 2015, 2011, is out of date. And they're worried that the police and the authorities don't have the power to intervene when they see problems on the street to do with hate crime. And I think an issue they're going to have to look at, Camilla. Thousands of people taking part in those marches yesterday were wearing masks, or they had neckerchiefs and scarves wrapped around their faces. Why is that so? Why is that allowed? What are they hiding from? And I saw on a tube station myself 3 young men get onto the tube. They'd been to the march with their pro-Palestine flags, with all masked, started shouting abuse in the tube carriage, saying, anyone here from Israel, anyone here from Israel, could they please take their masks down if they're going to say that?
Hatred?
Of course it is. And we all stood there. What did I do? Nothing. Because I'm not as young as I used to be. Might have said something.
Well, people would be really intimidated. Also, why are people wearing balaclavas to peaceful protests?
Why are they? And I think this is all the things that Braverman and Gove want looked at, the language they're using. If people are chanting that sort of hatred in a tube carriage or in a space, should they be arrested? Should they be taken off the streets?
But do you get the impression that Braverman is frustrated as Home Secretary, that the police aren't taking more action against people? We've had Max Hill, who's the head of the CPS, and indeed the police, say there are different ways to interpret the shouting for jihad on the streets of London during a pro-Palestinian march. I mean, I don't know how else I would interpret it, but if it was somebody shouting it with a balaclava on and then going on to talk about revelling in terrorist atrocities against Israelis, I think I'd probably be worried about the word jihad being used.
I would, because it's about holy war, and yet she's being frustrated because the police, as ever in my view, always seem to err on the side of caution, always seem to err on the side of the offender. We have to go back to this doctor, by the way. His own Facebook talking about the violence igniting waves of joy and elation. That's got to be close to inciting...
Well, it's the glorification of terrorism, which under that old legislation, which I think Braverman and Gove, as you say, want to beef up, that would be classified. But I think if people are celebrating in the massacre of women, children and babies on the streets of London, then you would hope that the Met Police would step in and make some serious arrests.
Because there's no debate in this country about whether Hamas is a terrorist organisation. It is. Now, Jeremy Corbyn may struggle with that, former Labour leader, who might want to call them my friends. But
famously described Hamas and Hezbollah as friends.
But they are a terror organisation as recognised by this country, the European Union, the West, America, NATO, the United Nations. So this is why Braverman and co are very anxious. And I think Willie Shawcross did a review of the current terrorism legislation, and he said it's not strong enough, and we've got to get to grips with it. But I'm not so sure now that there would necessarily be the cross-party consensus that you might have expected, because we've seen, haven't we, in the last
well, there's not
few weeks.
There's not even inter-party consensus in the Labour Party. So let's just briefly talk about the dilemma that Starmer faces. He's got, I think, a quarter of his own MPs now calling for a ceasefire. He doesn't want to call for a ceasefire. He's instead talked about humanitarian pauses. How does he play this out, Piercy?
It's very difficult because he's now got 3 very powerful figures, 3 of the most powerful people outside of Westminster: Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, Sarwar, the leader in Scotland, and, of course, Sadiq Khan, who's got a very difficult election next year in London, in my view, all saying ceasefire, which is a flat contradiction of Starmer's position. Starmer, I think, is now becoming almost a minority in his own party, because although he wants people to think that the days of the Palestinian flag being flown at Labour conference in the bad old days of Corbyn have gone, this conflict is showing there's still huge sympathy for Gaza on the Labour benches, and still, I would argue, a great hostility to Israel. He's trying to present himself now as a world leader. Wasn't he strutting the stage a few weeks ago, meeting Macron and these sort of people?
If he appears to sort of flip-flop, because he has previously said that Israel's got a right to defend itself, then he's just going to look as if he's manoeuvring for political reasons rather than humanitarian ones.
I wonder what Tony Blair has told him to do, because they're on the phone a lot, aren't they?
You think he's the puppet master?
Yes, I do.
Well, let's move on to the Tories' woes. What on earth do we think Peter Bone is doing out campaigning with James Purseglove, who's a Tory minister, at the weekend? The Sunday Mirror have snapped them together. I mean, there's no crime in this, to be fair, Andrew, but it looks a little bit short-sighted, doesn't it?
Peter Bone has been suspended for allegations of bullying. He's been suspended from the Commons. He can't go into the Commons, so while but he's denied it.
Yes.
But there's a by-election coming up in his council by-election in his constituency. He's still a member of the Tory party.
Borough, I believe,
he's still a member of the Tory party. Tom Purseglove, who's the minister in the next-door constituency.
Sorry, I called him James Purseglove.
Tom Purseglove,
sorry.
A very fine Brexiteer, by the way.
Yes,
they
indeed.
both are. In the next-door constituency, thinks, well, he's still a member of the Tory party. We want the Tories to win the by-election, so I'm going to go and campaign with it.
The optics.
You didn't expect the day at Sunday Mirror to catch them in action. Lights, camera, action.
Well, the Mirror will do that, won't
yeah,
they?
and of course the Mirror are desperate to stick any anti-Labour, any anti-Tory stuff on the front page because they know the splits in the Labour Party are going to become a very big issue.
But back to Starmer, how hard is this? Mate, you've got one job. You just keep your powder dry while the Tories implode, and yet his own party is now imploding itself.
And it's just when this war started, somebody said, well, this is a real problem for Rishi Sunak because it's going to drive the oil price up and all that. I said, hang on, this is going to expose the huge divisions in the Parliamentary Labour Party over their support for Israel.
Labour are definitely struggling much more with this issue than the Tories.
They've done so much on anti-Semitism post-Corbyn, and now they've got the problem back again.
Let's talk about a happier story. You mentioned Tony Blair earlier. Happiest day of my life. Mandelson finally marries his partner of 27 years. Now, you've got a personal stake in the story, Andrew, so you wanted to pick it.
I wasn't surprised, it has to be said, not to get an invitation for the happy occasion. Well, all those years ago in 1998, when I was a young reporter, Peter Mandelson was outed as a gay man on Newsnight, BBC Newsnight, by Matthew Parris, a former Tory MP who was also gay, because there'd been a scandal involving a Labour cabinet minister who was gay. And Matthew Parris just said very casually, oh, everybody knows there are other gay cabinet ministers. Who says Jeremy Paxman? Peter Mandelson, grown. Of course, lots of people, as we know, what we know in the Westminster bubble, Camilla, know one thing. Outside the Westminster bubble, they didn't know. Peter Mandelson was horrified. I was working on a newspaper you know very well at the time, the Sunday Express.
Great paper.
Edited by a very great woman journalist, Amanda Patel, and she said, how do we follow that up? I said, easy. We ran a nice story about who his boyfriend is, which we did. It was Ronaldo. No problem there, because if a woman cabinet minister like Mo Mowlam had a new boyfriend, the papers were all over it. Oh, but you write about Peter Mandelson. He was a very, very powerful figure in New Labour, and he doesn't want people to know he's gay. You're in trouble. 4 weeks later, Amanda Patel was mysteriously fired from that newspaper. And I quit the newspaper in midway through editorial conference.
Do we think there was a leaning on?
We do, because Lord
Hollick,
who at the time owned the paper, was a very close friend of Lord Mandelson's.
Lord Mandelson's got lots of very close friends in very influential places.
And yet here we are, sign of our times, 27 years later. He's happy to pose for photographs in the papers.
He's still together with the guy
and they're still together.
And
I knew that they were a happy couple. And very. I think I called him his snake-hipped Brazilian lover.
Oh!
As I recall. Looking at the photographs now of Ronaldo, I couldn't say that now.
We have come on a bit, haven't we, Andrew? In the
Amazing
sense that
times.
I don't know if it would still be a story
Wouldn't
today.
Wouldn't be a story now.
To be outing a cabinet minister as gay. Nobody would mind
care,
right?
Of course not. Nobody would care. And who does care?
Well, let's see if we care about the next story. Sue Gray's son is wannabe Labour MP.
Funny that.
Isn't it? Now, is this nepotism? We've got Sue Gray obviously having moved from being the resolutely impartial civil servant...
The most impartial civil servant we've ever heard of.
To becoming Keir Starmer's chief of staff. Yeah. And now, lo and behold, we discover that her son... He's not got a seat yet. He's not been selected for a seat, but he is a parliamentary candidate for Labour. He's a potential parliamentary candidate.
Yeah, remember, Sue Gray, of course, went from astonishingly the custodian of ethics in government to... which meant she conducted the Partygate inquiry into Boris. Some people say she pulled her punches. I think the report finished off Boris Johnson. Job done, would say Keir Starmer. Then we discover that she'd been in secret talks with Keir Starmer about becoming his chief of staff. She is his chief of staff now. I saw her at the Labour conference. She fixed me with a death stare.
Did you not have a little chat?
Tried to. Back off.
Ooh.
I said she's party activist. Back off. She doesn't talk to the press.
Oh, OK, fair enough.
And now
she's not media-facing.
No, but now we discover her son, who, to be fair, has been a Labour Party activist for many years and is the chairman of Labour's Irish group, is on the shortlist now to be
Yes.
Labour candidate in a very safe, winnable seat. He'll be a Labour MP at the next general election.
Is that
And
your
I'm sure the
prediction,
fact
Andy?
his mum, who runs Keir Starmer's office, will make no difference whatsoever to
No,
whether he
nothing-
gets that. None whatsoever.
nothing at all.
It'll all be about merit and ability.